TIFU by taking my Austrian Jewish friend to my family farm in Sri Lanka. I'm Sri Lankan and I met my friend while studying in university abroad in London. She became one of my closest friends and it was only because of her support. I was able to complete my last year of study while I wasn't able to travel back home, and my sister passed away in 2020 due to the pandemic. Imagine my excitement when she decided to take 3 months off and relax. I invited her to come to Sri Lankan and to my delight she said definitely. She arrived 2 days ago and yesterday I drove her to my ancestral family farm in rural Sri Lanka, near Tiruconamalai. I took her. She greeted my great-grandfather and my grandfather. They had laid out a feast on the floor and we all ate on the outdoor patios. I introduced her to them. My great-grandfather didn't know where Austria was, so I told him it's just by Germany. Now comes the F-up. His exact words. Germany? Au Germanier. Ah, Hitler great man. Because Hitler. No Sutta here. Because Hilter API free. Hitler very very good. Basically. Germany? Ah, Germany. Hitler is a great man. Because of Hitler there are no British here. Because of Hitler we are free. She obviously understood what he meant. She was stunned. I saw her, she was just stammering. And then became dead silent. My great-grandfather saw it and immediately said sorry and even was very apologetic. Even though I covertly said we could go, she stayed and completed the meal. Although it was really tense. I drove her after that away so she could be alone. I apologized but she wanted to know what made my great-grandfather praise Hitler out of nowhere. I explained his backstory. He fought against the British. And today she spent the day with him explaining the crimes of the Nazis and the Holocaust. She in no way has to do that and I am so grateful that she is doing so. In simple terms, she is explaining the Holocaust to him. He is horrified and is apologizing profusely. It's the first time he is hearing about any of the atrocities done by the Nazis. I'm beyond grateful for my friend explaining to my grandfather. She didn't have to do that and explain the Holocaust. She is an Austrian Jew and her family was directly affected by the Nazis. For her, the pain caused by the Nazis is personal. Backstory of my great-grandfather. My great-grandfather is exactly 99 years old and in his late teens he went to India and somehow became part of a small guerrilla force fighting against the British in the jungles of Bengal. This was during the famine and the stories he tells are heartbreaking. He used to raid small storerooms that were full of whatever little food that was left, that the British were intending to give to the big Nawab. I think he means the Nawabs of Dhaka, and distribute it among the villagers. He was also part of a raid on a European club where they were holding a large food party during the famine, and he has so many other stories like that. After 1945 or 1946, he couldn't come back to Sri Lanka as the Brits still controlled us. Instead, he went in a fishing canoe for about a month in sea and went to Java to help some guerrilla forces against the Dutch. He learnt some English in India to communicate, but as he was from a small village in Sri Lanka during the colonial times, he never received a formal education. In India, he learned of rumors about Hitler. Also, most villagers who supported the force my grandfather was in never learned anything more than Hitler makes the Brits uncomfortable and that Hitler is the enemy of the Brits. Therefore, they believed that he was some great hero trying to liberate the world from the British. He also said that some people believed that Hitler was a person capable of performing miracles. Also, according to him, some Hindu villagers believed that Hitler was God Vishnu in human form while some Muslim villagers believed that he was a prophet. According to him, for a long time, he too believed that Hitler was a god. But as a bodhisattva as we are Buddhist. In Indonesia, The Dutch were the oppressors, and as he and others learnt that the name Hitler also made the Dutch uncomfortable. Again, that means that Hitler should be good, as all he saw was that the Dutch colonials were cruel. And as Hitler makes the cruel people uncomfortable, that means he thought that Hitler must be a great man. He moved back to Sri Lanka just after we gained independence. So sometime around 1948 or 49, he moved back to his village. Raised my grandmother. My grandmother and grandfather were born there and stayed there as farmers. My mother was born there, but due to the war and she and my father moved to the capital, Colombo, where I grew up. My great-grandfather is in no way a Nazi. He is the kindest person I knew. In fact, he held his land in defiance of both the LTTE and the Sri Lankan government. When the 1983 riots swept across our island, even though Trinco wasn't affected that much, he helped a lot of Tamil people shelter in our farm against some Sinhala mobs. He and my grandparents are some of the most generous people I know and would also welcome anyone with a broad smile and share whatever they have. It is just that he spent his late teens, early 20s fighting against the colonizers, and as Hitler made the Brits and Dutch very angry, as the colonizers were bad, he along with others concluded that Hitler was a great and good man. He never received any formal schooling as he was a child OFTHE village. And also because of the Civil War, our farm only got electricity in 2010. So he never learned of the Holocaust and how evil Hitler actually was. About my family farm. My grandfather and great-grandfather still live there, and although I grew up in Colombo due to the war, whenever possible we used to visit. It was one of my favorite memories growing up. There was a beautiful old coon tree and an irrigation stream right in front of the land. My childhood visits there used to be me and friends that I made there, eating fruits from the coon tree and bathing in the stream. Sometimes, I was frustrated that there was no electricity. There was a small reservoir to the other side of the paddy fields and a small ruined temple nearby. Elephants also sometimes came towards the reservoir. The cooking of my grandmother and grandfather were heavenly, and they often took me around the farm to pick things to cook. TLDR. Took my Austrian Jewish friend to my family farm here in Sri Lanka. My great-grandfather claimed that Hitler was a great man. This is because he believed that, as Hitler made the colonists uncomfortable, that means Hitler should have been good. My friend and we were horrified. But she is explaining the Holocaust to my great-grandfather. Edit. Grammar. This is an incredible teaching moment. You have an amazingly compassionate friend. And your grandfather is capable of and has embraced growth. I know you feel like you fucked up, but I think you helped your friend and your family. This is an amazing story and a real eye-opener on the opinions of the British and the Dutch around the world. Your family history is amazing. Great-grandpa's stories needs to be heard. Please document as much as possible. As an Indonesian, this is the first time I've heard of freedom fighters coming all the way from Sri Lanka and India to help in the cause of independence. I hope when you get the chance to speak to your great-grandfather, that you may pass my well wishes and gratitude for his service. This isn't a fuck up. It's beautiful, and I'm so glad to hear that both sides opened up to share and learn from each other. Especially for your great-grandpa, as a significant idea he's held for most of his life is provided with a brand new nuance which he still embraced. In the media of recent years, too many times when people hear something offensive they just shut down and simply choose to stick with a negative reaction and double down when their beliefs and thoughts are challenged. Even worse, when it turns to online vigilantism that's so prevalent today. I'm glad this attitude was not present in this misunderstanding. Especially kudos to your Jewish Austrian friend whose family were deeply impacted and hurt by Hitler for generations, but still had the heart and patience to challenge your great-grandfather's worldview in a constructive way. I hope this kind of open-minded discourse can happen more often, so that more people can have the opportunity to see a more nuanced view and deeper understanding of the complex world we live in. Thank you for sharing. I don't think you messed up at all, but created a beautiful teaching, learning moment for everyone involved, including us Redditors. Fascinating story. Thanks for sharing it. Sounds like a really impactful experience for both your great-grandfather and your friend. I'm glad she had the patience to talk with him about it calmly. What a lovely person. I've never learned so much from a single Reddit post, let alone on TIFU. This is a great post and I'm beyond grateful you shared it with us. This is not the history we want. It is the history we need. Honestly, what a story on both ends. Wow. From your great-grandfather being open to learn and recognizing he was making your friend uncomfortable to your friend taking the time to explain something that causes her great pain in a manner to educate. Personally this made me smile today. So thank you. This just goes to show how history can be viewed differently depending on which side of it you're on. Thank you for your story and all the details, and only by coming together and learning from each other can we get a better view of the whole picture. I am reminded of that video that went around a couple years ago where the kid opens his Christmas present from his grandpa and it's a copy of Mein Kampf. The dad snatches it and says, "Minecraft Dad." I said Minecraft. Tears of joy. Good on your friend for taking the time to educate him. Hitler was praised even by the British and Americans before the war, because he developed Germany faster after World War I. Hitler's evil side isn't much known to old people here because Brits and Dutch were so cruel and people thought enemy of the enemy is friend. British India, Ceylon was included then, sent most troops for the WWII, fought in all theaters, and even for both sides. There was a time when German submarine attacked Chennai. I'm from Tamil Nadu and we share many things as two nations. I always wished Sri Lanka and India would be together as a single nation, so there might be no civil war there. This is a great story and a moving family moment, but I see no TIFU here. You didn't fuck up. Instead, you gave your great-grandfather and your friend a gift. She was given the gift of sharing her family's history, and the history of so many others who were lost to Nazism. He was given the gift, at his advanced age, of learning important information about a man he thought he knew. Hey, fellow Sri Lankan! Exclamation mark. You did not fuck up here. It sounds like everyone involved handled this in such a compassionate way. This story reminds me of an excerpt from Trevor Noah's book, Born a Crime. People in the West take for granted that everyone knows about the Holocaust, and don't take the time to understand the horrors of colonialism. Also, I'm hoping to visit my in-laws' ancestral homes in Sri Lanka later this year. I can't wait to see your country. You've got a good friend. Definitely not a fuck up, just a beautiful moment of teaching. Thank you for this story. History isn't just what you read in books. Whether it's world history, personal family history, almost all human cultures, countries, etc. have crossed paths at some point in our past. Many of the connections were wars, famines, trade, exchange, and every degree of friction in between, causing everything in the range from great harm and tremendous benefits. The sooner more humans understand more of the past intersections, the better we all can relate to each other now. It's cliché and an oversimplification. But if you fail to learn from the past, you are doomed to repeat it. Rings true emo. Your friend is to be commended on her patience and tolerance, and you mention she is both Jewish and Austrian. That's a complicated legacy to have in your personal history. As after 1938, Austria was just another German state until the end of the war, and it is the birth nation of Hitler. I would assume that being a Jewish person in Austria, or Germany for that matter, would inoculate you when having conversations with people that are not as familiar with mid-20th century history. If I were in the Raj prior to the English departing, after a couple hundred years as a colony, I do not think that the Holocaust, which wasn't known about widely until towards the end of the European War in the 1940s anyway, would be my top concern. In spite of the oversight of the Holocaust, I can empathize with your great-grandfather's first position by the cliché. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. The fact that he was still self-aware enough of his ignorance of the history and learned from it is an inspiring story. I only hope I can live to 99. Let alone keep learning. It is an absolute truth to me that war is horrible. World War I and II are really to be studied, as these 20th century wars were so devastating to human beings as a species. And when a single human has absolute authority on who lives or dies, it never ends well. The peace that was formed at the end of WWII, in spite of localized, regional conflicts, is now under risk, because new generations have failed to learn. Hitler is remembered for his anti-Semitism, but many still revere and admire him, in spite of his absolute ruthless, authoritarian power. Most often you will hear something like, yes, Hitler and his cronies started the Holocaust, but he also created the Autobahn and the VW. As if those things redeem him in some way. Same thing for Mao, Stalin, or even Vladimir Putin today. Sociopaths all. They give no concern to others, in order to maintain political and absolute power. What an interesting foo. I really enjoyed reading it, and I'm glad about the outcome. Smiley face. I think your grandfather is amazing. A strong individual who stood for what he believes is right, whether it was against the British, the Dutch, the Tigers, or the SL Army and Sinhala mobs. Thank you for sharing his story. I wonder what his take on the current situation in SL is. Also, my condolences for your sister.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Haircast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.